For your viewing pleasure, this broadcast of the Municipal Council meeting of Alpena is made possible by the funding provided by the City of Alpena. Thank you for your generosity.
Good evening. Welcome to the Alpena City Council meeting of March 19th, 2018. Call to order, please.
Hess.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Nielsen.
Here.
Nowak.
Here.
And Walagora.
Aye, here. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any modifications to the agenda this evening? Okay, approval of the minutes, special session of March 1st, 2018, regular session of March 5th, 2018, and closed session of March 5th, 2018. Any issues or changes? Citizens appearing before council on agenda and non-agenda items are allowed 5 minutes each to address council. This is the only time during tonight's meeting that you're allowed to address council. If you do so, please come to the podium and state your name and address for our records. You might be the only one.
Oh, Don is.
Don's
I'll let him go first.
Good evening, Don Gilman at 220 East Crapo Street. I appear as Don Gilman, not the city building official. I just want to make a couple comments about the resolution that was in the packet from the about the march and stuff on March 24th. While in full support of the horrific, not in support of, but it was a terrible accident what happened and what's been happening in this country with school shootings and mass shootings and all that other stuff. But personally, I just don't feel that a ban on weapons is a solution. And I looked at this resolution that you were sent, and the statistics for Gun Violence Archives revealed there's been 46 mass shootings in 2018. There's been more than that already. They probably pulled their data a week ago before St. Patrick's Day. There's probably closer to 50 now. And out of those 50, 2 of them were mass shootings, larger mass shootings at schools. The more recent one in Kentucky, which over a dozen students were injured and a couple were killed. That one did not involve any type of what people call military assault weapons or an AR-15. That person had a handgun. A little further down it says, whereas perpetrators of mass shootings prey on the most vulnerable of our society, making schools their target. Well, that's right. Criminals do the same thing. They go to the most vulnerable. The difference between when I think of the most vulnerable in our society, I think of the people like my father that used to live at tender care, the geriatrics, mobility impaired, somebody in a hospital room. School age, especially high school students, are some of the healthiest people in the United States of America overall. The thing that makes them vulnerable is what government, school boards, parents, where we choose to put them in the environment in which they learn, which is an unprotected environment. So they're a little bit further down, it says, whereas the call to fortify our schools and our professional educators do nothing to address the true cause of this uniquely American problem. I agree with that 100%. It does not do anything to address the true cause. However, what it does do is it attempt to solve the immediate problem of our kids being gunned down in schools where nobody else seems to have a gun to be able to stop the violence. And the only other thing I want to say is that it makes a reference to a military-grade assault weapon, that our legislator has taken no action on that. First off, you can't buy a military-grade assault weapon. I happen to personally own an AR-15 that was the exact same make that was used in the last school shooting. However, other than the fact that it's a semi-automatic rifle, you can get a bigger magazine and it goes bang every time you pull the trigger. It's nothing like a military weapon. I'm a retired Army First Sergeant. Military weapons are not only more accurate, they're more durable, they're made to shoot thousands and thousands of rounds without overheating and breaking down the parts. They're thousands of dollars. They're not $500, $400. So to me, some of the stuff is a little bit, while all good of heart, I understand. It continues to be terrible tragedies, all the shootings in our country. I just don't see where this is the answer to reducing violence in the schools nor anywhere else. Most of those mass shootings, out of the probably 50 now that have happened this year, if you read through the statistics on them, a lot of them are bar club, bar club, bar club, bar club, house party, house party, house party. Very few schools and some other crimes. I just don't, as a citizen of Alpena, feel comfortable that our council would pass a resolution to support trying to ban, because basically what this says is ban weapons, more stricter gun control laws. And there's already one going through the House right now. As a matter of fact, it's called the Assault Weapons Ban. And if you read the bill, it doesn't just deal with what most people refer to as military-style weapons. It deals with every single semi-automatic firearm manufacturer. People that go bird hunting with semi-automatic shotguns, banned. Semi-automatic pistols, banned. Semi-automatic deer rifles, banned. It's a very overreaching, broad sweeping bill that probably has no chance of passing anyway, but if people just see it, they see assault weapons ban, and you get a feel good, oh good, they're doing something about assault weapons, but it's not. The thing we need to do is keep our kids safe and have them in a safe environment. And until we figure out the mental health issues, how to safely report bullying or kids that are having problems. I mean, everybody, I'm sure, is aware of the fact that just by the news media reporting, all the news medias, there was a lot of warning signs with that kid that eventually went in and did that terrible crime. But that's not something that's going to happen overnight. My opinion is they need to protect the students where they're at, just like they do in Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And you have something, Sue?
Yes. I did ask whether I needed to go to the podium. I was told I did not need to, but I am going to speak as a citizen and as a property owner in the city, not as city manager, regarding the item under new business, the zoning ordinance amendment. And it's simply, I guess to start with, I just want to thank everybody who's been involved, I think for the last year, 2 years, of addressing this issue, which was created by a decision of the U.S. Supreme Court that pretty much made all sign ordinances throughout the country unconstitutional, because they do regulate to a certain extent, or always have, by content, and that is no longer allowed. So for the staff, for NIMCOG who assisted, for the Planning Commission, just to go through all that and disentangle that and come back with an ordinance, I give them a heck of a lot of credit. I'm glad they were doing it and not me. However, having said that, there was one part of the revision that I do disagree with as a property owner, and as a residential property owner, and that's on page 113 of the ordinance, which has to do with residential uses. The old ordinance limited all those in the single-family residential, and really right on through even into the multifamily, to 4 square feet of signage as far as the largest sign. The proposal now is, if there is a home occupation present on the lot, 1 sign is allowed that shall not exceed 8 square feet, which is double the size. As a property owner, residential property owner, I do object to that. I certainly have no problem with home occupations. They've been in our ordinance since well before I got here. They're in almost every zoning ordinance you'll find. And they serve a very useful purpose. But generally, it's always been known that when you get a home occupation, the fact is you are now moving a business into a residential district. And usually that is done, be in the home for a variety of reasons, save, reduce costs, more convenience for the business owner who's also living there, so forth. But also in terms of moving into that residential neighborhood, is that, and being allowed to run your business there, is that you are under greater restrictions than you would be in a business zone. One of the usually with a home occupation, one of the chief purposes of it is that whatever is allowed is that it does not disrupt the neighborhood or the residential character of the neighborhood. Nowhere have we, and part of that is you're going to end up with smaller signage because, again, that's in character with the neighborhood. If you want the larger signage, fine, stay in the business district. And that's what I object to, is simply that larger sign, basically doubling it. And because we cannot be content, have any of the regulation based on content, even though it does say that you have to have a home occupation present on the lot, it does not mean that the larger sign has to advertise that business. It can basically say whatever is legal that the person wants to put on it at that larger size, because we can't regulate by content. And so that's my objection. I wouldn't want that for my next door neighbor to be able to have a sign that size. I don't know, I haven't talked to my neighbor, but I'm sure there are many who would not want that if I were to do it. And so that's the only thing I'm just expressing as you go through the process over the next couple of meetings to look at and consider. Beyond that, I think they've done a tremendous job with the revisions. I'm sure there will always be things that once we adopt whatever form it takes of a new ordinance, that we're going to go, oh, we missed this, and we're going to go back and have to make other changes. That's inevitable. But overall, for the complexity of the issues that they had to address, they did very, very well.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else? Okay, next is the consent agenda. A is bills to be allowed in the amount of $345,394.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Hess,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nielsen,
Yes.
Nowak,
Yes.
and Walagora.
Aye.
Motion carried.
No presentations or announcements. We're down to Mayoral Proclamation, Social Host Responsibility Month. Underage drinking is a national public health issue with serious implications. Although we have done much work and made progress here in northern Michigan to address this pervasive problem, there is still much more work to do. According to a study by the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, an estimated 10 million people younger than the age of 21 drank alcohol in the past month in the United States. Whereas underage drinking is a problem that affects our community, our health, and our future. It exacts a terrible toll on individuals and families and places a costly tax burden on the community at large for law enforcement, medical services, and other social services involved in the prevention and treatment of underage drinking. And whereas underage drinking has severe consequences, many of which parents and caregivers may not be fully aware. Consequences of underage drinking may include injury or death from accidents, unintended, unwanted, and unprotected sexual activity, academic problems, and drug use. And whereas parents and caregivers have significant influence on young people's decisions about alcohol consumption, especially when they create supportive or nurturing alcohol-free environments. And whereas youth who start drinking before the age of 15 are 5 times more likely to develop alcohol dependence or abuse later in life than those who begin drinking at or after age 21. And whereas alcohol by use as young people is dangerous not only because of the risks associated with acute impairment, but also because of the grave threat to their long-term development and well-being. And whereas parents, educators, and community leaders who work with our young people every day are our best advocates for responsible decision-making. And whereas 100% of any alcohol consumed by a minor came from an adult, at one time an adult over the age of 21 was in control of the alcohol and a minor gained access to it. And whereas it is illegal for adults to knowingly allow their child's friends to drink alcohol in their home, even with the permission of their friends' parents, and adults have the authority and should have the responsibility to take steps to reduce the likelihood that their homes will become venues for underage drinking. And now therefore be it resolved, we as council members of the city of Alpena, a community committed to underage drinking prevention, do hereby proclaim April 2018 as Social Host Responsibility Month. We also call upon all parents, citizens, homeowners, and property owners to host gatherings responsibly and take measures to eliminate access of alcohol to persons under the age of 21. And tonight we have Barbara Edison from Up North Prevention with us.
Tuesday.
I'm not doing that.
He has fun with it.
Okay, next up, a report of officers, city attorney's response to the Nunneley Karschnick questions regarding the Huron Humane Society.
Council is in receipt of the memo that I prepared in response to this letter. I did not necessarily go down each of the 18 particular points that Mr. Nunneley and Mr. Karschnick addressed because I thought some of them overlapped. So I tried to do it by topic versus a direct response to each one of the questions. But the first topic addressed in their letter is whether any council members who are found to have violated section 3.14 of the charter, whether they're subject to any potential discipline. And section 3.14 of the charter basically says that no member of the council nor any officer of the city shall be interested directly or indirectly in the profits of any contract, job, work, or service. And that's really the main part of that section 3.14 that the letter addresses. It goes on to say at the end of it that if any member offends the provisions of this section, they shall be guilty of misconduct in office. And that leads to potentially section 3.5 and some of the remedies that are available in 3.5. So the initial question that arises from the letter is whether any council members, as it relates to the issue of the Huron Humane Society, whether any of them would have potentially violated section 3.14. And that's the gist of the letter. The part about whether there's any direct pecuniary interest is simple. There isn't any direct pecuniary interest for any of the members of council on any of the committees that any of you sit on respectively. So there's no direct conflict. Okay, so it'd be my position that 3.14 simply doesn't apply in the sense that because there's no direct conflict, it wouldn't matter. Now, to that extent, I researched the Attorney General opinions because there really isn't case law where you can go and say, is there a case out there that says that when somebody does this, when they're sitting on a board or a council, that it's automatically a conflict of interest? It just doesn't work that way. The Attorney General answers questions on behalf of municipalities to try to say, this is what I think the law is in the state of Michigan, and unless there's an opinion of a court that says otherwise, the Attorney General opinion is considered binding precedent in the state. So if you go research the Attorney General opinion and you have the same issue in your municipality and factually it fits to the situation, you say, that's the guidance. The Attorney General says this is okay, or the Attorney General says this isn't okay, or the Attorney General says, well, it might be okay with
this stipulation or that stipulation. So I did not attach the Attorney General opinions because they're multiple pages long, and they relate primarily to direct conflicts of interest. There isn't any that directly relate to an indirect conflict, but they kind of talk about that in some of the opinions. So the first opinion goes back to 1980, and it says essentially that a public entity is not prohibited from entering into a contract with a corporation whose stockholder is a full-time public servant of the public entity and who holds more than 1% of the outstanding stock, where the servant doesn't directly or indirectly solicit that contract. Okay. Now, one of the things that's interesting about going back to section 3.14 for a second is it talks about that those provisions or those prohibitions, as they apply to any council member, shall not apply if the council shall declare on its records by unanimous vote of the remaining members of the council that the best interests of the city are to be served by the waiving of such prohibitions. So even though there's a prohibition to begin with, council could waive that if they decided to do so. And what this first Attorney General opinion basically says is that that public entity and the public servant should not be directly negotiating a contract between themselves. And if they do, then that's a problem. If they don't, but the public servant may have some ownership interest in the corporation, that still is okay as long as there's a full disclosure of that. And so even though it says that they're not prohibited, there is somewhat of a prohibition from that public servant directly engaging in the contract with the city in negotiations, how much it's going to be, things of that nature. They're also talking about, not funding that applies to this situation, but we're talking about contracts with the city. So as a bid process, if any one of you owned a construction company and you were making a bid to do a city project, that's much different than what we're talking about here. But that says that public entities shouldn't be engaging in that. The next opinion goes on and talks about whether a member of a city council who's employed by a corporation who's seeking some type of quasi-judicial action from the council, whether they can participate in or vote on that. That case is also somewhat unique in the sense that it's a case out of the city of Midland, and Dow Chemical was asking for some exemptions from Midland's zoning ordinance and things of that nature. They wanted to do different things. Well, what happened at the time, it was unique because 3 of their 5-member council were Dow Chemical employees. And so they were like, well, how can we conduct business if these people can't vote on it? So, once again, that's not the situation that we're talking about here, but it does lend some guidance to say that, hey, if you're an employee there and you're a public servant of the city, you probably shouldn't be engaging in contractual negotiations with that particular public entity. The next one was whether somebody has to disclose their pecuniary interest when everybody knows that they have an interest in a particular contract and it's been voted on, and whether they have to disclose that each and every time, or whether a standing disclosure on the record is okay. And that basically said it's okay if that person abstains and 2/3 of the membership vote. And that was, once again, a direct pecuniary interest. That's somebody who had been providing a service through their private company to the public entity and was receiving some direct benefit financially from that, which, once again, doesn't apply to us. The next one provided that the sole law on the issue in the state is the Public Act 317 of 1968 as originally written and then amended. The reason I put this in here was that this basically trumps Section 3.14 of our charter in any event. And it really says that this is the sole law in the state of Michigan. Whenever a city charter provision is in conflict with the state law has to be followed. Now, Coincidentally, our section 3.14 has kind of the same language as that law anyway, so it doesn't necessarily trump it in that regard. But that act basically said it's the intention that this shall constitute the sole law in this state and shall supersede all other acts in respect to conflicts of interest relative to public contracts involving public servants other than members of the legislature and state offices. It's somewhat unique in the sense that if you're a state legislator or you hold a state office, you're not subject to that, but the local villages and townships and cities are. So in any event, I put it in there to say that trumps 3.14 in any event. Okay. The other thing, though, that came along after that was the request of the Attorney General was, well, that applies to direct conflicts. What about indirect? What does that mean? And that's where it's a little murkier. There isn't really a direct opinion that says automatically when there's an indirect conflict that this applies. So all of you as members of the City Council sit on various boards. And the argument could be made that your service to those boards and service to the city could create an indirect conflict of interest to the extent that Target, Humane Society, Hunt, others receive funds from the city. Now, the funds they receive from the city aren't funds that flow through to those particular agencies and people are getting paid out of them necessarily. I mean, some they are, but, you know, as an example, the one we're talking about here, the Humane Society. The Humane Society helps provide a service to not only the residents of the city, but also the county as well. And the city pays a certain amount of money to have them perform that service for us. The council members that are implicated in the letter they're not receiving any funds from that. I mean, so it's not a direct conflict. I guess the argument could be made that there's some indirect conflict, but the service is a community-wide service. It's not a service that's being provided to the council members. The council members are just part of that board that helps, or that organization that helps provide that service for other members of the community, including all of us that are sitting in here. So I think it's probably a stretch to say that's an indirect conflict, but I guess that could be argued. So what I said at the end of the day is it would be my recommendation that during the budget process that each of the members basically announce which boards they're on and let council consider whether they should abstain from the voting. Okay. So I know there's probably a question of some of you, do we have to do that, or is the recommendation we should do that? The recommendation is kind of a we should do that. It's not a we have to do that. There's no law that specifically says, there's no Attorney General opinion that says that has to be done. My recommendation that we should do that is to maybe alleviate the issue from cropping up sometime in the future, because as we all know, sometimes when one thing happens, 2 weeks later, something else happens. So from that perspective, the recommendation is to consider that. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that council needs to do that. I'm just saying that's a consideration that you may want to take up at a later date. I don't think it affects my ultimate opinion here, which is that none of the members have a direct conflict of interest as it relates to service on any of those boards. The next issue that was addressed was the Open Meetings Act, and there were some questions about did the city post the Huron Humane Society meeting that occurred in January of 2018, and whether the city had some duty to do so. The meeting that was held at the Huron Humane Society in January 2018 was not a city meeting. It was not subject to the Open Meetings Act. The city had no legal requirement to post the meeting. To the extent that the letter asked that there be some finding that there could have been a violation of the Open Meetings Act, I wanted to be clear to the public that no council member violated the Open Meetings Act at the January 2018 Huron Humane Society meeting, nor is there any proof that any deliberation took place among any of the council members as it related to the Huron Humane Society issue. Mr. Karschnick and Mr. Nunneley have pointed out that Section 3.5 of the city charter provides for removal and disciplinary action by the city council if it felt that one of its members willfully violated any of the provisions of the ordinance or charter or any other law. But there's no proof that that occurred, so I don't think Section 3.5 applies in this situation. The letter next asked the city to address the Freedom of Information Act and whether certain documents should be turned over. Once again, the Huron Humane Society is not a city organization. The city has a liaison or member on the board pursuant to the service agreement that we have with them, but we have no supervisory authority over them. We have nothing to do with their structure. We have nothing to do with what their bylaws say, how they can vote on things. So there's no specific Freedom of Information Act request that was made, and even if it was made as it related to documents that were in possession of the Huron Humane Society or somehow implicated what they were doing, that would not be something that the city would have anything to do with in any event. Now, I advised Mr. Nunneley, once we got the letter, I wanted to make sure, was he making a specific Freedom of Information Act request? He advised that he was not, but since it's mentioned in the letter, I thought we should address it. Mr. Karschnick and Mr. Nunneley, like any other citizen, would be able to make whatever Freedom of Information Act request they wanted to make. If they make such a request, we'll deal with it appropriately, but I don't see, based on what's in the letter, that there's any implication of the Freedom of Information Act. There was some questions in there about how this particular meeting got held in city council chambers, and that because it was held here, that somehow it became a public meeting and somehow became subject to the Open Meetings Act and the posting requirement of state law. The Huron Humane Society made a request to have the meeting here. City Manager Sundin approved it. Could have said no. We don't have any specific policy. The first line of looking at whether a meeting can be held here is generally, is the room available? So people make different requests at certain times. So for instance, if an agency made a request to have a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, the answer would be no, because it wouldn't be possible while we're having a council meeting. So, that request was made and it was granted. There was questions about whether City Manager Sundin intervened in that at the direction of somebody. The implication is that did council direct him to get involved in it? That did not happen. Mr. Sundin had shared with me, even prior to getting this letter, that he had received several emails from members of the public, which is not unusual for his job, to receive different things from different members of the community. Sometimes those emails are a complaint. Sometimes those emails are just a request for informational, it's an informational request. Sometimes they're requests saying, hey, I think you guys did a good job on this issue. So they come in many various forms and fashions, and they're not always the same. So he was alerted by some members of the public that there was some concerns about what the Huron Humane Society was doing organizationally. He was not intervening on behalf of the city as city manager. Whatever involvement he had with the council members as it related to their sitting on the board was just informational in general, finding out, hey, what's going on. I think the community knows, based on what's been published and what's been talked about in the community, that there are several members of the public that aren't happy necessarily with the Huron Humane Society and what they're doing, which in and of itself doesn't implicate the city council or the council members in any way. There are many people in the community that are unhappy with certain things that happen on some of the public service agencies, but that's an issue between them and the public service agencies, not an issue between them and city council. So when City Manager Sundin was asked to look into those things, he did what he felt was appropriate. The question arose during that meeting about whether the Huron Humane Society could stop members of the public from coming in. And based on what I know about the Huron Humane Society and their organizational structure, they can. I mean, they're not a public entity. They don't have to let people into their meeting. They can do so if they wish to do so. If they let members of the public in, they can let them speak if they want to let them speak, or they can say that they can't speak. So, I mean, it's their meeting. It's not the city's meeting, so it's their decision to make about who they let in and who they don't let in. What occurred from the information that I've gathered is that the Huron Humane Society was not going to let anybody into the meeting. In fact, I think Councilmember Nowak came and tried to get in and was turned away. I know City Manager Sundin attempted to contact me at that time for me to put my 2 cents worth in. I wasn't available when he first called. I did call him back. I did advise that it probably didn't look good to not let members in, or not let members of the public in, excuse me, but that the Huron Humane Society could do whatever they want. If they didn't want the people in, they didn't have to let them in. What I did also advise them is that if they're not letting other members in, City Manager Sundin shouldn't go in. I mean, I didn't think it just doesn't look good if you're letting certain people in and then not letting other people in. So if you're letting them in, fine. If you're not letting them in, that's fine too. So my understanding of what occurred is that Mr. Sundin, based on that, did not attend the meeting, and then found out shortly thereafter that the Huron Humane Society did let members in, and they conducted their meeting and went about their business. In summary, there's no direct evidence that's been presented to me as city attorney that would lead me to determine that any council member is in any way, shape, or form in violation of any of the city's ordinances or the charter. The city manager was not asked to intervene and to take any action on behalf of the city as it related to this issue. If any determination is made in the past, present, or future that any members of our council have willfully violated provisions of the charter or ordinance, that member can be subject to Section 3.5 of the charter. And the last issue that was addressed is our council members subject to recall provisions of the law. Council members are always subject to whatever recall provisions of the law there are. I'm not making any opinion to the council or to the general public as to what options are, but members can always be removed by recall petition if it's timely filed and if there's a legitimate reason to do that. So the last part of the letter addressed, well, can people be recalled? And the general answer would be, yeah, anybody can be recalled when it's appropriate and legal to do so. So I'm sure there's probably a few questions. I tried to be as brief as I could, but I like to hear myself talk sometimes too, so I get ready.
Well, I appreciate the report, Bill. I really don't have a whole lot of comment other than the potential conflict of interest, indirect conflict of interest. I guess we can maybe address that further at the time of the meeting when we go to approve the budget. Personally, right now, as I stand, and I read this before Bill did it, is that I don't see the necessity for it. So I'll just throw this out there and we can decide at that time, but just so you can kind of get an idea of where I'm at, you guys want to let me know where you're at. We're not making any money off of any of these boards that we're sitting on. I don't see the conflict of interest, and if it's arguable by somebody that would like to argue the fact that I am somehow benefiting from the hunt team, then we will perhaps argue that at that time, and Bill might even have to do that on my behalf. Or the Economic Development Council or the Huron Humane Society or anything else. But I'm the only one that goes to those meetings on this board. If they come to us and they ask for funding, myself and Officer Jett or Chief Jett are the only two that have attended the meetings. We have the most knowledge of how we feel as city employees as to what those funds are used for, and whether we, and so we're coming there on behalf. Why else would I even go? I'm not going there because Matt has lots of time on his hands. I'm going there because council directed me to go. So if it comes to budget time and we're supposed to make a decision on whether we give that entity money or not, and I can't participate in the discussion or the vote, doesn't make any sense to me. So with that said, I appreciate everything else that you did to educate us on all of the points that were relevant. And I don't know if anybody else has anything as well.
If you'd give me a chance just to respond to that just briefly, I don't want to get off task here, but,
That's fine.
you know, I searched as far as I could search for any specific authority on an indirect conflict of interest, and there simply isn't one. The best I can analogize to is this, is that at one point in time, under the law as it relates to a request to remove a judge from sitting on a particular case, there used to be a standard many, many years ago that talked about the appearance of impropriety, meaning that somebody looked at something and said, well, that just doesn't seem right that that person would be sitting on that and maybe voting on giving some other entity money that they sit on the board on. So you can make the argument that there might be some appearance of impropriety, okay? But the standard is clearly not the appearance of impropriety. The standard is there a direct conflict with that? And I don't see a direct conflict for any of our members of council sitting on those boards. So I think Matt makes a good point in the sense that you're not receiving money for this. It doesn't make sense that you wouldn't be able to cast a vote as a part of the budget process. But there's just no direct case that I can say with 100% certainty that that's the way it works. So it's not the appearance of impropriety, it's actual impropriety, actual conflict. And I don't see how any of you would have an actual conflict.
I would like to reiterate what Matt said. When the position at the Humane Society became open, I was nominated for that and willingly and enthusiastically accepted that job because I'm an animal lover and I understood very clearly what would be expected of me, and I had that time to give. I knew that Cindy was already on the board, but she had nothing to do with any decisions made at the city level. On a higher level, neither do I. We simply represent the board to the city and the city to the board. There's no ulterior motive. I don't gain anything from this, neither does Cindy. We simply serve. I'm sorry that anybody would make it into anything else. It's unfortunate.
We'll need a receipt file of Bill's opinion.
So moved.
Second. Johnson?
Yes.
Nielsen?
Yes.
Noah?
Yes.
Walagora?
Aye.
And Hess.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Communications and petitions. First up is Target Alpena informational report and budget request. Jim Claridge, sir.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. Thanks for your continued support. Target's mission, really, when you break it all down, is to provide for the economic well-being and the quality of life, just for this community, but for the region as a whole. You know, over the last several years, we've seen an incredible amount of growth in both new businesses moving into the area as well as new business being born here. Major investments are being made in us in the Alpena area because people are hearing from us and they are and about us. They see an opportunity to be something to be part of something special, which is the upside really of a growing community. The surrounding areas around us see that too, and we're carrying the full weight of that responsibility as well. We're changing, we're getting better, and we're making progress. Our relationship, no surprise to anybody, but our relationship with the city spans decades, right? It's based on confidence and trust in one another, and we work closely together to make certain that we grow and grow in accordance with the vision of the community. It's really what Greg identified, I think, in his State of the City report, which was really, it's a true partnership. He touched on that and several other points in his recent report. We really like to continue what we started, but to do that, we need a continuation of the financial assistance we receive from the city, as well as our other stakeholders for that matter. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that we don't, typically operate under the same financial wherewithal that other EDCs around the state do. But I can guarantee you one thing, and that's that we're making a significant impact with the investments that we do that are made in us. Those things being said, I guess on behalf of our entire board, we request that the city consider providing us with funding of $40,000 for 2018-2019, which is the same level as it was provided for last year. Thanks for your support and your continued consideration.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Receive and file.
Yes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Next up, Wildlife Sanctuary Board.
Sure.
What? Oh, just trying to get out. I'm sorry.
Nielsen,
Yes.
Noack,
Yes.
Walagora,
Aye.
Hess.
Yes.
And Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you,
Motion
Anna.
carried.
Appreciate it. Now, next up, Wildlife Sanctuary Informational Report and Budget Request. Terry?
My name is Terry Boujon. I'm recently elected chair of the Alpena Wildlife Sanctuary Board. I'm here to just present some of the things that the board does in as far as taking care of the island and the sanctuary. According to the Land Trust Fund agreement in 1985, the purpose of which purchased the land, the purpose is to maintain quiet recreation and environmental education on the island, to which the board does a great extent. Some of the work that is accomplished by the board annually pretty much is taking care of trails so that people stay on the trails. The park is the city's only natural park, and we want to maintain it in that condition. There's a lot of trees that are downed on trails that have to be removed. Bark is applied to trails. Also, there's a commitment to remove invasive plants. We've made that commitment to keep native species there. So annually there are things like a knapweed pull, which gains a lot of public support, and we remove quite a few trash bags of knapweed from the island every year. Also, there's an autumn olive cutting that takes place, which needs an herbicide application because it's pretty tenacious. There's a certain amount of vandalism that goes on the island. A recent Eagle Scout project by James Schultz was severely damaged. There were tree identification signs. We took those all off, had fabricated new base plates of much heavier material and heavier fasteners, and so far to date I think they've been left alone. We also do some work at the edge of the river. There's a lot of invasive called frog bit. We had over 100 fifth graders last year from Hinks and Besser School involved in that. First the cattails were cut, and then frog bit was pulled by the students, and they had pulled over 1,000 pounds of this. This invasive is also recognized statewide, and Alpena is on their list for continued removal of this species to keep it from spreading even further. A number of educational programs are also, the board is also involved in, the river rats being one of them. This program consisted of 5 different events throughout last summer and will be continued this year. They had over 75 elementary students participating, and the event was culminated with the Science in the Sanctuary, in which about 100 children participated. There are numerous agencies that the board partners with for this function, including Huron Pines, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Nemrock Cooking for a Cause, Girl Scouts, and Friends of the Watershed, Lake Huron Watershed. Another program is the Art Residence Program, which has little or no cost. This is in its 7th year. The purpose is to gain quality works of art to be displayed in the future River Center, which the board is also active in getting this center going, which is to be built in the Duck Park area. Last year's artist in resident, Sandra Murchison, has donated her contribution and is currently displayed at the county library. This year, the artist has been selected is Charles Pompilius. He's a portrait artist, but also does landscape work also. The island is promoted in a number of brochures, some of which are statewide in pamphlets that feature areas of interest in the Alpena area. And we also maintain a pamphlet rack of self-guiding brochures of various aspects of the island. A lot of these brochures need to be replaced regularly, and I guess it's a good thing. I never see them as trash on the island to pick up, so they're being used apparently. In the future, a lot of this work will continue. The primary focus will continue to be on the island because that gets the most public attention. Plantings are anticipated this year for milkweed seedlings on the island, and also additional plantings in our demonstration of a riparian buffer on Deck Park. The tool shed will need further work. This is one of the areas that gets vandalized repeatedly. Ironically, or I guess luckily, back early, a number of years ago, youth did a lot of work on the island and painted the shed, and they painted one wall and signed all their names on it. That always gets left alone. So, and the back side of the shed gets left alone. The front and the one side are full of writing again. The west dock gets a number of paintings and writings on boards there too that we'll have to maybe replace a board or two. The water trail that we maintain, some of the marker buoys are off course, probably from ice flows. They'll have to be dragged back on course. And of course, the invasive species such as the knapweed, autumn olive, and frogbit will have to be continually removed from the island and the waters around it. So to this end, I'm asking council to approve the budget that was submitted for $4,000, and also for the River Center to set aside a match of $30,000 for the future building of that center on the watershed.
Thank you, Terry.
Mr. Gujan, I have one suggestion. The kids who painted the two sides of the shed on the island were Youth Volunteer Corps kids.
No, they painted their names on one side of the shed, but the graffiti never touches it. They leave it alone.
I know. What I'm
Yeah.
saying to you is, Youth Volunteer Corps is still in existence. You might contact them and see if they paint the rest of the shed, and maybe they do the whole thing alone.
Well, yeah, I don't know if that would work or not.
You
They
never
just
know.
signed their names as being workers on there, and they have painted pretty colorfully done,
Yes.
but nobody seems to spray paint over it, so
Yeah, that's a good thing.
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we only
Thank
have
you.
really two sides to paint.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
I move we receive and file.
Second.
Noack,
Yes.
Walagora,
Aye.
Hess,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
and Nielsen.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next up, Thunder Bay Theater, informational report and budget request. Jeff.
I'm not wearing my hat tonight, so you know this is serious. Alrighty, so Thunder Bay Theater has been around in this community for for 51 years. And in my research, this is the first time in a long time that we're coming to the city and asking for support, not because we want to, but because we need to. The impact that we're making on this community is greater than I think it has been probably in the last decade. And I want to share some of that with you. But also, being the producing artistic director, I understand that a lot of you may have the question, why Thunder Bay Theater as opposed to everyone else who's coming up and asking for some support this year. So that's really why I'm here and what I really hope to impart on you today. So we are currently in the middle of a 5-year strategic planning session, which is, again, the first time that has happened at Thunder Bay Theater in about a decade, maybe 2 decades. I have a lot of my board members here tonight so that we can show our unity and our focus and our vision on the future and what we believe that Thunder Bay Theater has to bring to our community. And that right there, the third line on that slide, is be part of their journey. We are not officially ratifying that as our new slogan, but that is where we're moving towards. And the there in that refers to the young professionals that we bring to this community who do so much more than just perform on stage, but also our students, some of whom are also sitting here in the audience tonight, who are really becoming, the voice for our next generation, especially at this time in history. So who are we? You've already heard these things before, probably last year when I came in to talk about Education Week, but we are still Northeast Michigan's only year-round professional theater, primarily serving the 6-county region, and we're really proud of that, and we plan on maintaining that for quite some time. We are one of 5 TCG, which is the Theater Communications Group theaters in the state of Michigan. So that means that we are one of 5 that is recognized by this organization as doing great work, and the other 5 are all down in Detroit. The Detroit Repertory Theater, the Detroit Public Theater, Williamston Theater, which is one of the most reputable organizations in the country, and we're one of them. We are putting Alpena on the map through our work and through our commitment to our young professionals and to this community. And I'm very proud to say, as we kind of established was one of our goals for last year, we have become the premier theater educator in Northeast Michigan. Last year we served 3,000 students with our educational tour. This year we will serve 7,500. All of the students in Alpena Public Schools, elementary and middle schools, through our own in-kind donations and some fundraising efforts. So the people that we are going to be asking for some funding help to keep in Alpena for a year at a time are the educators that are going to be going into the schools and having a huge impact on the lives of the kids living in this community. And I think that's really, really important. So how do we serve our community? These are the 3 things we're going to list real quick. So our mission. Our mission is extremely important to us, and we revised it last year at the beginning of the year when we established this new board. And it is a year-round nonprofit committed to providing consistent, high-quality productions, which is something that we feel as a unit we have been successful and unsuccessful in over the past decade, and what we really feel we've been successful in the last 4 years, and educational opportunities, utilizing that professional core company augmented with community talent. And when we go and we interview these individuals and we talk to the schools, that educational component is one of the things that makes Thunder Bay Theater unique on a national landscape. Because a lot of theaters are just focused on putting on great work and entertaining a lot of people. But we feel, especially in the community that we live in, that if we are not bringing to light stories of diversity, inclusivity, all of the things that we're talking about right now that we just want to talk about rather than create hot button issues on, then we're not serving our community to the best of our ability. And the theater is one of the best ways to discuss those topics and to just bring enlightenment and discussion and collaboration on to do that. And without our professional core company, although I think we could still be successful in that, it would obviously hold a lot less weight than having 4-year trained professionals or professionals who are pursuing their degree in this to really prove that we are the best and that we want to be the best, not for ourselves but for our community. That's really important. Attendance numbers are climbing. My wife and I arrived at Thunder Bay Theater in 2014, and as you can see right there, we had 7,200 patrons. In 2016, we had 8,800. So clearly something is working, not just in the educational department, but also in the entertainment department. 2017 numbers are not published on Data Arts, which is the website and the service that we use for when we're going after funding with the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs. Pretty much all of the arts organizations in Michigan use them. But last year, our in-house numbers actually dropped to 6120 last year, but that's because we did our public performance of West Side Story at the Park that had 2,000 individuals, and because for the first year we added that educational tour back in. So when you take the 6,100 plus the 5,000 that we went to through free performances and grant-funded educational performances, we actually reached about 11,000 people, or just over 11,000 people last year. And we intend to do even more this year with the 7,500. That's doubling our tour. So this year our goal is to hit 15,000 served, which I think is pretty cool. So there are the public performances that we were talking about. That is a drone photo from Zachary Irving for our production of West Side Story. For those of you who don't know, Last year, around February, Daryl over at True North put a little post on Facebook and said, "Hey, we're looking for acts. What should we do?" And I was just as bold as I am today, coming and talking to you, and said, "Hey, I think you should let us put on West Side Story," which again is a story of diversity and inclusivity, and so important. I mean, probably one of the most important stories in the musical theater canon. And we had no idea what to expect. We were kind of thinking that there might be like 300 people, 2 of them being my parents screaming loudly in the front row, and that's what happened. And being able to watch a story of multiracial relationships and tensions, watching that happen, and at the end of the play when we had Tony cradled in Maria's arm and the entire audience was silent and then rose to their feet, I think that is as big a testament as to the impact that Thunder Bay Theater has and the change that we can enact through our art and through our work for anything. So I just think that's a really important photo. Does our community care? Because sometimes, if I'm being completely honest, and this is not personal, it feels like we don't, right? Because we're always talking about the natural resources, and it's really hard to fundraise for the arts in this community. And that's, again, one of the reasons that we're here today is because we believe it's important, and we just want to share with everyone how important we think that is. So I kind of did some research, on just whether or not does our community care about the arts, or are we okay with, just having 2 theaters and appreciating that and saying, okay, that's cool, yeah? So in the City of Alpena Comprehensive Plan, I was astounded to find that we are in the top 5 of assets to protect. Obviously, ACT, who is some would consider our partner, some would consider our rival. We like to consider them partners. Is right there with us, but I think that for longer than I even give it credit, Alpena has considered itself an art town and has considered itself a cultural hub, especially in Northeast Michigan. So this kind of gave me some ground to stand on when thinking about whether or not we were going to come in here and ask if we could possibly gain some support. Because obviously, we think that the arts needs to be here, and we want to be here, and has the power to affect social and cultural change. Then we went to the comprehensive plan, and the top ones are unemployment, development of new jobs, and attracting investment in the community and keeping our money here. And this one may draw a little bit of unclarity, but especially with our educational initiative that we started last year, we are completely changing the way that students in our school system are looking at their futures and looking at the way that they can pursue a career or use their voice in ways other than, just writing essays or, I love the robotics program, but obviously we're all very supportive of that. And there are other ways to find your footing. I like using that term. One of my board members loves telling me about the story how, she was very intelligent in school and almost all of her teachers said, well, why don't you go to school for pharmacy? And she said, well, no, I want to go be a writer. And they said, why? So that's a little bit of a systemic problem that I see, but we'll cover that. We'll cover that later. But issues to address. I believe that with our new educational initiatives, we are really working on solving some of the issues that need to be addressed. In the fact that we are clearly trying to develop our young talent and then be able to retain them. When we got here to Thunder Bay Theater in our first year, we sent 1 student to school for theater. We are now sending consistently every year 6 to 7, and they are getting ready to come back, and we are so ready to embrace them and give them jobs, hopefully better paying jobs, and allow them to come back home, which I think is a big problem that we have in Alpena that we want to try and conquer, is how do we bring our young talent and our young professionals back home and give them a reason to make our community great and to share their energy and their passion with our community. And then the recreational plan, obviously, again, natural resources, so important. Last year we became a concert because we did our public performance, and we're going to be doing it again with Hairspray. True North Radio Network was very, very excited about the turnout, and that is now kind of an open-ended idea. This year we're going to be doing Hairspray in concert. Again, another socially driven play about diversity, inclusivity, and we're so excited to continue to build on that. That's something that's become really, really important at Thunder Bay Theater with our new board of directors, with our new vision. We want to be that voice in this community, and we feel like we, with our training as artists, are probably one of the best suited to do so. So again, this just identifies that, clearly theater and the arts are important. And obviously we have a wonderful downtown that is busy and bustling, but we can say without a doubt that 11,000 people come downtown who are probably going to go out to eat or probably walk through the downtown, and that's because of us. And when you include the sanctuary in that as our partners, I mean, Fletcher Street's the place to be, y'all. It's pretty cool. So, finally, the 2018 Economic Development Plan. Again, this kind of speaks to what I just spoke about in regards to what do we want to improve upon. I have already started preliminary discussions with Alpena Public Schools about trying to engage the CTE part of, or the theater part of CTE, which is actually a pretty big component of CTE. Obviously, we have a long way to go. We probably have to have Theater 101 before we can start working on CTE programming. But we have a really good relationship with Alpena Public Schools right now and some of the private schools in town. And there's clearly a want and a desire and a need for arts in our education. And who better than the professional theater to provide that for our community. Residency program. So, this is kind of one of the things that drives me in my day-to-day life. I envision a Thunder Bay Theater where we have 10 employees who are living here for at least a year at a time. That doesn't include our administrative staff. My wife and I love it here. We just signed 3-year contracts. We're here. And our managing director, Molly, she started to sign year-long contracts. But our young professionals who either just graduated from school or on their way to graduating from school, we want them to understand what Alpena is and why we're here. Because a lot of them sometimes, we all know young people, yeah? Sometimes they're just looking for the paycheck or they're just looking for, what comes next. We want and we strive to find good people who want to invest in our community. That's actually what we say to the 600 people that we audition down in Webster University every year. I tell them all very, very bluntly that I am looking for people who want to be invested in before I ask my community to invest in you. So that's what we're now asking our city council to do, is to invest in these young people who are not just performers or scenic designers or lighting designers, but they are also teachers, they are mentors, they are family. They are really what's affecting this change. As much as we are, they're the ones that are really, they're the ones that people feel comfortable walking up to and admire and saying, wow, I loved you in the show, or wow, when can I get tickets tomorrow? They're the ones who are, well, I've got some of the pictures. So the nuts and bolts, brass, Thunder Bay Theater currently has 75% invested into our residency program, and that residency program involves having 8 professionals outside of the administrative staff that are in Alpena from February to December, right? We want those people to be here to share their story, to make an impact on our students, and obviously provide great theater to our community. We are asking for the City Council to help us with 25% of our proposed residency costs, which would be $12,600. So right now we have enough money that we are investing into our company that allows 7 professionals to stay for about 36 weeks at $150 a week. We're asking that you help us in making 8 professionals be able to stay with us for 36 weeks in a year for $175 a week. That is on top of housing that we provide for them, over top of the theater, so that is part of the compensation package. But the $175 number came from the fact that when they're on tour and they're going all over the state, if they have a day that doesn't allow them to be at home to make lunch or dinner, we offer them $25 in per diem. So that's where that number came from. Essentially we want to give them a full stipend that we feel they can eat and eat well, every day of the week. That's where the $175 came from over the 36 weeks. How will this money be spent specifically for those resident core company members? As we were talking about some of the other organizations today, there was mention of a city council appointed member on the board. I know that Thunder Bay Theater would be more than welcome to, accept that or, discuss that if that was something that the city council would like, especially if, the support was garnered, and that would be a way to instill that support and the confidence in that support. There's that rundown on the numbers again. I know I'm running low on time. How do we handle our money? You have all these numbers broken down in your PowerPoints, but we can go through them real quick. As you can see, this is one of the areas that really separates Alpena Civic Theater from Thunder Bay Theater. Not good or bad, just the fact that we are spending 41% of our annual operating budget on our staff. Because again, without our staff, we wouldn't be a professional theater. It'd be, I think, unfair to call ourselves a professional theater to our community if we weren't hiring, 4-year professionals or people who are on their way to becoming professionals, and having those interns there. With our building, as some of you may know, we have a capital campaign going on, which is hampering us quite a bit. 25% on building grounds and maintenance is an unfortunate reality, and we're working to fix that. And then 1% on operations. That covers show rights, sets, costumes, props. You may or may not know that we only spend $500 on every set. So I think it's pretty impressive what we're able to create on that kind of a budget, and so on and so forth. So that just kind of lets you know where your piece of the pie would fit in, and I think that it would make quite a big difference in the lives of everybody who works at Thunder Bay Theater. And then that's 2017. Thankfully, we were able to reallocate some of the money that we were spending on building and grounds and the operations back onto that staff, because we've continued to grow and continue to expand, which is really exciting. In 2016, what did I say? It was 171. The year before that, in 2015, our operating budget was at 136,000. So clearly, we're making huge strides towards becoming, I think, a better operating and more efficient organization, and obviously your support would be a big part of that. Recent grant receipts. Grant writing is kind of what speaks directly to that huge burst of operating income. We've received report from the Michigan Council and the Community Foundation graciously over the past 2 years, and we used all that money. That's what none return means. We didn't have to give any back, which sometimes happens. If we ever, are contracted to do a tour show in another county and we don't fulfill it, we have to give that. Well, we want to give that money back. But again, in 2017, no money returned as well, and as you can see, the list got a lot greater in regards to what we're doing and how we're doing it. So it's not just the big community foundations. It's a lot of the smaller ones. The Comstock over at First UCC in Petoskey Harbor Springs, Grand Traverse, Besser Foundation was really supportive of us, and that doesn't even go into the corporate sponsorships that we have through the Dork Brothers and Great North Pet Supply and Alpena Shipwreck Tours and H&R Block, and I mean there's so many. They're all on our website if you're interested in exactly who. But again, that reinstills in us the fact that Thunder Bay Theater is important and valued. And we're asking for help to kind of take that into the next level. Why Thunder Bay Theater? This is kind of going back to the original question of, why us instead of anybody else? Why Thunder Bay Theater? We have made it an absolute priority and goal for our organization to be Alpena, to embody everything that we want Alpena to embody. We jokingly but seriously tell everyone when they come here that they become #Alpena famous. Check out our Instagram, #TBayT, to see all of our Alpena famous individuals. That's our Marvelous Wonderettes at the Alpena News Business Expo 2 years ago, and then we have become fan favorites at the Cardboard Boat Regatta every year. And one thing that's really important to us is we always open up the theater to our students whenever they're going to prom, so that they can take pictures and so that they can be, so that we can be part of their night and they can share their night with us. So, that's kind of the impact that we're really making on our community. Financial impact. This is a calculator from Americans for the Arts, which is a huge arts advocacy organization. And essentially what you have here, I know it's a little bit hard to read, but they are in your slideshows. You put in the population of our community, obviously under 50,000, our organization expenses, and then the total attendance. I'm always flabbergasted by the number that Thunder Bay Theater is putting $427,000 back into this community. I mean, it's just, it's mind-blowing. I don't necessarily always believe it, but I mean, the numbers don't lie. And then the second chart there indicates if there's 15,000 more, which would be part of what you would hopefully invest in. And again, the numbers just keep going up, and our 5-year plan has us at $300,000 by year 2023. So we're excited about that, and we think that those are attainable goals, and we hope that you are going to be a part of that. Cultural impact. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but obviously our work with the students is it's humbling. It's humbling, and it takes the words out of our mouths. And again, if it's not going to be us, then who? One of the more harrowing stories that I have is that when my wife and I got to the theater in 2014, a lot of parents came to us and told us that they weren't comfortable with having their kids come to the theater. And I don't know why, and I don't really care why. But what I know now is that we are a family, and we are instilling discipline and morals and time management and all of those things that are not just theater skills, but are skills that change their lives. We talked a little bit earlier about the kids that are getting bullied at school. We are talking about the kids that don't feel like they have a family at home, and we are changing that. I mean, we have got 23 kids in Robin Hood right now. We've got 40 who are auditioning for every single play, and they just so badly want to hang out with us and just, make art and have fun. And that is so hard to do, especially, again, in these times for any kids. And then on the right side, we have that picture of, again, our diverse and inclusive cast. We have students who are transgender. We have students who are queer. We have students of different ethnicities, and Thunder Bay Theater is a place for them to come to. And I think Alpena is getting better at this. Alpena is growing in this, but Thunder Bay Theater is a clear agent in exposing and allowing people and actors of color and alternative lifestyles to find their voice and to share their voice in a safe environment, in a supportive environment, which is so important because it creates discussion, it creates dialogue, it creates the world that I think we all want to live in, and that is so important. So we're at the end. I have a board member, Jim Burles, who would like to share his thoughts on what your support would mean. And
you left me about a half an hour.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. My name is Jim Burles. Many of you know me as an engineer, but I have some notes I'm going to just read through so that I'll be as quick as possible. I'm an engineer that loves theater. My daughter Amelia found her passion. She loves to be on stage, just like many other kids in this town. Her career choice is the theater. Unfortunately, she is frequently asked the question, yeah, well, what's your plan B? All right? That's not fair. She gets so frustrated by that question. She was in Hamlet this past fall with many of the young professionals at TBT, and the young professionals have provided her with the confidence that she can actually do it. All right? And she should do it. We are so lucky to have the professionals at TBT right out of college that are living the same dream that my child has and many others. What an amazing inspiration that they are to our youth. TBT also supports our economy. I can just tell you this. Every time my daughter is in a play up here, I have 10 family members from downstate. Sometimes they have flown into the airport, from Louisville, Kentucky. They come up here, they spend the night in the hotel, they go to all the restaurants, and they shop, all right? So there's so much that it provides us, not just the inspiration to our youth, but I think that's the most important, but also economically too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, and then I just got one more person who wanted to share his opinion. Thank you for allowing me the grace to keep going. But this is Adrian Rochelle. He's going to be with us now this summer for his third season. And for anybody who's been to shows before, you clearly can recognize Adrian for several different reasons. But he is the embodiment of who you will be investing in, should we receive this support. And I think what Thunder Bay Theater is about and where we're going. So I just wanted to share his message.
Hi everyone, my name is Adrian Rochelle. I am originally from Champaign, Illinois, and then I went to school at Southern Illinois University where I majored in musical theater. And now I am a semi-resident of Michigan. I am doing an internship at West Bloomfield at the Jet Theater. So I'm enjoying that. So how I got started with Thunder Bay Theater is that I did something that's called the Midwest Theater Auditions. They're held in St. Louis, Missouri, and this was about 3 years ago now. I auditioned for, there were about 25 to 30 companies there, and Jeff decided he liked my audition package and called me back. And I ended up going to his callback about 3 times over the whole weekend because I auditioned on Friday, but I had friends that auditioned on Saturday and Sunday, and so they got called back as well. So I decided I would just attend the callback with them because I just loved what Jeffrey had to say, and I knew that I just had to work here. But oddly enough, the track that I eventually got that first summer was offered to my friend before it was offered to me, but now the rest is history, and I am just now in love with Thunder Bay Theater. And what keeps me coming back is because it's just like, one, it's just such a welcoming community, and I think that's just one of the biggest things to take away from Thunder Bay Theater as a whole is that I just really do now have a second home with Thunder Bay Theater. And it is also a place to work at where I can feel so artistically fulfilled and just really proud of the work that I do and the people that I do it with. And that's just one of the best things that I could ever ask for as a theater professional. And I also know that Alpena kind of needs to hear the story that I have to tell. As an African American male, I know that I'm one of the few sources of diversity that has been brought to Alpena, and I receive that as a great honor and privilege that I can tell my story to Alpena, and Alpena accepts my story. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I like to come back. What a consistent pay increase would mean to me is that I would have to hesitate a lot less about coming back to Thunder Bay Theater. And not to say that there's much hesitance there, but as I'm getting older and taxes are starting to weigh more heavily on me and I'm just picking up more responsibility as an adult in society in general, it gets kind of hard when a job that is so important and does need all the time that is asked of me, but then again, so much time is getting taken away from me where I need the job that I'm coming to do to give me more financial stability. And so that's something that I definitely have to start thinking about more as the future comes. And so...
Well, that's great, Adrian. So in closing, Adrian was talking about the time at the theater and what we're expecting of these individuals. We contractually expect these actors to work 60 hours a week, and we still only want to pay them $175 a week. It's funny because, in closing, a few weeks ago, someone made a comment about how there's a big difference between ACT and Thunder Bay Theater because ACT does it for the love of theater and we do it for the pay. The 3 administrators at Thunder Bay Theater who work 3,500 hours a week are making a combined $35,000 a year. And we're not even asking for money to support us this year. Furthermore, at the most recent Community Foundation Youth Advisory Council grant presentation, I finished my presentation and one of the students raised his hand and said, "Is this really that important?" And that was pretty harrowing to me. So we're here today to ask for your support to reinstill in our community that the arts are really important, and that we're providing a service that a lot of other people can't, especially when you go outside of Northeast Michigan. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. Before he goes, does anybody have any?
So sorry.
I just want to make sure, because this is a new request.
Yep.
Jim's presentation and Terry's
Sure.
a little bit. Does anybody have any specific questions just regarding his budget or his request at all before he leaves?
I can also answer them via email or
Clarification
whatever's
or
legal.
anything?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. You're off the hook, my friend.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
I move we receive and file all of it.
Walagora,
Aye.
Hess,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nielsen,
Yes.
and Noah.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next up is People for Social Justice Proposed Resolution.
Good evening. It's kind of hard to follow up that act. On behalf of the People for Social Justice and the organizers for the Alpena March for Our Lives, I would like to request that the City Council demonstrate its support of this event following the lead of many other cities across our state. We are gathering in solidarity with young people across the country who are using their collective voices to demand legislative action on gun violence. On Saturday, March 24th, community members from Alpena and surrounding areas will gather for a sibling march as part of the March for Our Lives movement. This march is one of hundreds happening around the country, planned by students and survivors of gun violence in communities big and small in all 50 states. This National Day of Action will focus on calling for lawmakers to make students' lives and safety a priority and to pass common sense gun safety legislation. School safety is not a political or partisan issue. There cannot be two sides to doing everything in our power to ensure that the lives and futures of children who are at risk of dying when they should be learning, playing, and growing. Every kid in this country now goes to school wondering if this day might be their last. And as a parent, I live in that same fear. We ask that you stand with us on March 24th, that you refuse to allow one more needless death. We urge you to adopt a resolution in support of this march and acknowledge that something needs to be done, and we can no longer keep silent. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, we haven't met, so I'm going to
Yes,
ask
sorry.
that you are
I am Jessica Luther.
Jessica Luther. Okay,
Mhm.
sent the email?
Yep,
Okay.
that would be me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Receipt of file?
Please. It's been a long meeting.
What?
Oh, sorry.
At the very least, we should receipt of file
If no one wants to take action.
I would like to say something.
Okay.
I appreciate Don's Gilman's comments earlier during the public session, and I grew up in as many of us did, in families that hunted, and there are a lot of responsible gun owners. But I do feel that something does need to be done, and I don't think that this resolution is asking for a ban on weapons. It doesn't say that. It just says sensible policies and to stand with our children for their future. So I just want to make that comment. And so I'd like to make a motion that we pass the resolution.
I'll second the motion.
Let's have some discussion if we may, because
Okay.
I'd like to say a few things too. Is, one of the things that, for myself, that I'm uncomfortable with is a few things. First of all, let me say I 100% support the walk and the march. I 100% support that. I 100% support students' rights to petition our community leaders, and as well as our state and federal leaders to make their voices heard. I 100% support that. There's a lot of things within here that are tough for me to support. First of all, I agree with what Jessica said. It isn't a partisan issue. It is one of those things where it can be divisive and it can separate us. But there's a lot of things in this whole issue of students or school shootings and so on that need to be addressed, as well as sensible gun laws, as they say. One of the things is if we're going to pass something like this, or say something like this, you have to really look at the mental health issues that are happening all around the schools, and the unlimited or limited funding for those initiatives really upsets me quite a bit, because not only the fact that there isn't enough mental health care in our country, the fact that our youth, our students are committing suicide, and they're overwhelming the resources that they have, and we need much more. And I'm sorry I'm emotional, but I recently lost somebody. And it wasn't to gun violence. It was because of mental health awareness. And so the trouble I have with this, I would rather, if this resolution said that we support our students and we support their right to march and petition our leaders and let their voices be heard, I'm 100% behind that. But if the resolution says that it's basically supporting, in my opinion, one issue, the gun problem, and not the school safety, which, trust me, the school board members that you talk to, city council, in my opinion, and all of us as a public really want to ensure that our schools are safe. But we have limited resources on a local level, and this is a federal level, issue, in my opinion, along with mental health. And, I support reviewing all of our gun laws, and I support the fact that, making sure that they are enforced as written, or making gun laws that make sense. But, there's so much more to this issue for securing our schools and stuff. So the resolution, as it is written, I have trouble supporting it the way it's written, but would be happy to support a resolution that simply said, I support the students 100% in their right to petition and their right to be heard. So,
in my mind, this resolution addresses it does address mental health. This is a multifaceted problem. There's not an easy fix. So if a few of the words in this resolution you have issues with, or somebody has issues with, there's so much in this resolution that is good. And for kids to come together with adults and be able to gather, and whether you agree with them or disagree with them, and march for their safety, however they accomplish that, I think is worth voting for this resolution. And that's my opinion. And we do need more money in mental health. If you look at how even locally we spend money in mental health, and I know there's not enough money, so what they do with the resources that we have locally is not much of it goes to students. It all goes to people in their 30s and 40s. If we would give more money to the students and address those issues, we wouldn't have to give it when they're 40, 50, 60 years old, because we would solve a lot of it. But since there's not enough money to go around, they attack the problem at the end instead of the beginning. And it's sad. There's so many students out there, children, young adults who need help that don't get it. And we have to start somewhere. We can't say, well, there's a few words in here that I don't like, so I won't. We have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere to solve this problem. And that's my opinion.
I don't have an issue with having to start somewhere. We have a resolution before us that has data and key points that could be argued piece by piece by everybody individually in this room all night long. The bottom line is that basically, beyond the facts or the data points that it has listed, it basically says, period. Now therefore be it resolved, the City of Alpena stands with the students and children of our community by demanding that our state and federal elected officials enact sensible gun control policies. That is all it's asking for. I do not support that, period. I just don't really want to get into a long and drawn-out discussion about it. I don't support that. And that is clearly, in my opinion, all this is asking for. Because the bottom statement, as far as coming together as a community for the March for Our Lives, we already did that in the proclamation that I signed last meeting. So if there's no other discussion, the motion on the table is to
Pass the resolution.
pass the resolution
As written.
as written.
The motion was made by Hess and seconded by Johnson. Hess.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Nielsen.
No.
Noack.
no.
And Walagora.
No.
Motion denied.
Thank you. Next up, we have new business, zoning ordinance amendment for sign regulations. Adam Paul.
All right. In an effort to curtail or move us forward in this meeting, I'm going to summarize some of this. If you have any direct questions, I'm more than happy to take them. But Greg kind of covered the bases a little earlier, but the Supreme Court decision reversed the town of Gilbert, Arizona, changed the way we have to regulate signs. Basically now, if we have to read the sign to determine what regulations apply to it, it is no longer legal to do so. That pretty much affected our community. We had some of those regulations, and every other community in the United States, pretty much. Planning Commission has worked diligently to prepare this ordinance. Well, I shouldn't say diligently, they took a lot of time on this, and rightfully so. This is very complicated, trying to figure out how to meet the Supreme Court's decision while still having a functioning ordinance. So they did pass this 8-0 at the February vote, or the February meeting. For the most part, the Planning Commission attempted to match the existing sign ordinance as closely as possible, while meeting the content-neutral standard as demanded by the Supreme Court. The commission reviewed the sign regulations of several other communities who recently passed content-neutral regulations in the process of drafting Alpena's modified regulations. A majority of their discussion at the planning commission level dealt with signage in the residential zoning districts. Particularly, the commission discussed the amount of temporary signage allowed. Temporary signage is regulated by the construction of the sign, and the modified language allows for a maximum of 12 square feet of temporary signage with no one temporary sign exceeding 4 square feet. The temporary sign codes includes any examples of signs, and for instance, these could include garage sale signs, real estate signs, political signs, and other signs that are easily movable. So just throwing it out there that right now the way it's written is if you wanted to have, you can have 12 square feet of signage. If there's a political race, then you distribute that for the political signs, or if your house is for sale and you want to have political signs, either way, right now the way it's written, the way I'm presenting it, cannot exceed 12 square feet for temporary signage in a residential zoning code. In addition, the commission decided to allow up to 8 square feet of permanent freestanding signage for a home occupation. This is 4 square feet more than what is currently allowed for residential permanent signage. And that's something that Greg talked about earlier. That is a change that the planning commission made that is different from the existing ordinance. The changes in general are pretty much to be content neutral. I will not go into each one piece by piece unless you want me to, but there are a lot of them. You'll see the red in the blue text. The red is deletions, the blue is additions. So staff would like to ask City Council to review the zoning ordinance modifications and approve the modifications to the sign section of the zoning ordinance so that the City of Alpena is in compliance with the Supreme Court ruling. Ultimately speaking, if you wanted kind of an example of what we're dealing with, and you don't have to go there, but if you wanted to, signs excluded, anything in red is what we're taking out, so you need to say there are a lot of changes, and anything in blue is what we're adding. So there's a few pages of just a lot of different changes that we had to make. That being said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. At this point, we don't have the ordinance drafted, but if I just want to get this introduced, I realize it's a lot. So we can, but if you do have any modifications for me now, we could, if it needs to be modified, we can do that while we're drafting the ordinance.
Adam, can I ask why Planning Commission put residential on, what Greg talked about?
Oh, the 8 foot.
Certainly.
Why double the size?
Why did they double it?
Ultimately, there were some arguments both sides, but the Planning Commission basically thought that 4 square feet was not large enough for permanent residential signs for a home occupation.
Have we had complaints about that from people who have home businesses?
Not to my knowledge. It's been 4 square feet for a very long time. Ultimately speaking, I haven't had many complaints, if any. I don't think I have any other than, well, I'll take it back. I've had one person that said they'd like a larger sign.
I've never, during my time, nobody ever came to me. And there is always the opportunity to go for a variance.
That's what I was gonna ask, is if it's been that size for all this time and we don't have a lot of complaints or any, I shouldn't say, complaints, because there shouldn't be one if they're not that.
I also
big
haven't
anyhow,
had any variance requests for it.
I guess I would suggest that we leave that where it was, unless, I guess I wasn't there, so I'm not really sure what the argument was, or the discussion was between the.
There was a lot of discussion. Basically, staff came in and initially recommended that we try to not change as much as seemingly possible. The existing, keep it like it is now, because it's been working, other than obviously it's just not content neutral. Ultimately, there were several members of the Planning Commission. There was one in particular that thought it should be larger, and the other members didn't think there was any harm in that. So that's where they came from.
I mean, I don't know, 4 by 4 isn't huge, but it's big.
But in a residential neighborhood, it seems sufficient to me.
4 square feet?
4 square feet.
Yeah.
4 by 4, I apologize.
Well, no, I was thinking of the larger
Okay.
sign. Just kind of trying to picture that in my front yard or my neighbor's.
Or all of your neighbors.
Or all of my neighbors. Well, and the point that Greg made is it doesn't even have to be their business sign. It doesn't have to be their
Yeah,
business.
we cannot regulate what they put in the sign, with the few exceptions of lewd or, yeah, that's the only kind of content we can regulate.
One thing I hate to do is send something back to a commission that's spent a significant amount of time on this.
I'm not sure
but
that
it's
it has to
fairly-
necessarily go back.
It does not.
If you guys want to amend it and approve it as amended,
Okay.
that's it.
Because it was a lot. I mean, I started reading it before I
Well,
realized there was 133.
I guess my suggestion would be, since it hasn't been really drafted yet, you know, what I asked Bill, I said, by the next meeting, we need it in ordinance form so it can go to first reading. It could still be changed then before you, at the following meeting, so it wouldn't be until the second meeting in April that you would actually vote on the ordinance. So again, this, or as you read it, if there's something else that as a commission, or as a council, you decide, we would rather have it this way, that you can make those amendments before you actually vote on it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I personally didn't have time to read the whole thing since Friday. So,
I'd also add that I can certainly invite the members that felt strongly regarding that language to the council meeting, and they can kind of tell you where they're coming from.
that would be fine.
Yep.
All right.
Do you need any action from us?
Not at this point.
Well, I had one other question.
Do we direct you to?
Yeah, please refer to me to, if that's what you wanted me to do.
Okay, yeah, that'd be best.
I mean, I really want to do it, so.
I already told you to.
A temporary sign is the sign that's meant to be only temporary, right?
Correct.
It seems, but there's no time for a temporary sign.
No. And ultimately, I don't think, legally speaking,
We
it's
can't
the
do that?
best. What we can do is regulate it based on conditions. So if it's been out there for a while and it's starting to look rough, usually they're not made out of the most greatest, best material. We can say the sign is not in condition to be displayed. It's not meeting the criteria, and we can have them ask them to remove it. Now, what they could do is they could swap it out and put another sign down just like that. There's
So a temporary sign can actually become a permanent sign.
Like
Yeah.
one of those garage sales that
The
never
way it reads in there,
ends.
yes, you could. I asked that same
Well, but
question.
that we can take care of because of other parts of our ordinance, which.
Yeah, we do have limitations on the actual garage sales that we can enforce. However, as far as signage goes, we've really kind of got hamstrung in certain elements.
What it does do though is you got 12 square feet, maximum of 4 square feet per sign. So you got 3 signs you can have. If it's during an election, you want to have 3 different political signs, okay, that's what you have. But if your house is for sale, you can't put up a for sale sign. You'd have to remove one of the political signs in order to put up a for sale sign. Or if your contractor comes in and they want to put up their business sign, you can't do it if there's already the other signs there. You know, you'd have to remove one. So it isn't just a matter of adding more. But you're right, because of the way the courts, they've created their own, Pandora's box, what are we gonna, the unintended consequences of what they've said, that we're just gonna have to deal with. We've always had the issue of political signs, where we just shied away from most enforcement other than size often.
So how it's displayed, that can be
Yeah,
also.
but, in terms of how long it's up there, the courts have pretty much said you can't do anything with it. And that becomes a problem with temporary signs. You see it in front of businesses now, where they put up temporary signs, and then after a period, they pull those up and they put something else on, because they're advertising some new sale or new item that they're selling, whether it be a restaurant or a store or whatever. So it's something that we've always had to deal with. Most places are very good, and most homeowners are, but you're always gonna have those that will take advantage, and you just deal with it.
I'd also offer, as you're reading through this, if you have any direct questions, feel free to get hold of me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we must direct our attorney to
I
draft.
move we direct our attorney to draft the amended ordinance.
Second.
You're welcome.
Do I get any input?
No.
As long as it's not an ordinance for other 2 feet, okay.
Johnson?
Yes.
Nielsen?
Yes.
Noak?
Yes.
Walagora?
Aye.
And Hess?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Let's see,
Hey,
next up,
Rich.
change orders for Starlight Beach Splash Park.
At the last council meeting, council awarded the contract to Meridian Contracting for the full amount, and we indicated that we would be coming back with a change order. And I wanted to, we prepared that, we've worked with the contractor, and we've developed a change order. Basically, what we're removing from the contract, there's a tree removal in there, DPW took it down. We're removing some colored curbing from the planting areas, removing overestimated splash park allowance for the seating wall. We originally had a lot more footage around the splash park than what we actually need. Removing overestimated splash park allowance for concrete walkway, and then we're eliminating the shoreline stabilization riprap, which is something DPW could do at a later time and not required to be done at this time. We've modified the contract, removed the colored concrete from the seat walls around the splash park. We changed the lighting, we changed the vendor that we had proposed to a different pedestrian light. We also, instead of putting pedestrian lights along the walkway, where it'd be more obtrusive, we went to some bollards, some low-level bollards that would just illuminate the pathway. We did have to add to the contract to install the larger water service to adequately supply the splash park and install additional concrete sidewalk along the walkway in lieu of the colored curb. This is what was originally proposed along there, and I'd like to just 2 minutes. When we did the RV park, we bought some new software. Steve manipulated that software. Shannon grabbed that software last week, and she was able to do this. It gives us a lot better ability to do a presentation. But originally, along each side of the planting areas, we had planned to put colored concrete curb in there. We started looking at that, and the price per foot of that, we were actually able to remove that curb and then put concrete in here for less money. So we were actually getting a wider promenade through there at a lower cost. This was, originally, we proposed red for the seating walls. What we've done is we've changed that to gray. A couple reasons. One, red looks great when you put it in, but it kind of fades to a dirty pink. And quite honestly, with the bright colors that are going to be in the elements within the splash park, it just wasn't going to be attractive. So we went to just plain colored concrete, and then just, this is the actual splash park, the rendition that Vortex provided us that will be installed down there. And again, this is just a larger version of what that beachfront will look like. It doesn't show up real well, but this is the existing concrete walkway. And we'll be tying in the barrier-free walkway down to the water's edge, and then opening that entire area up, and then taking the dunes out and putting, restoring the grass back behind there. So basically, we've cut, reduced the project cost by $96,467, and that with no negative impact to the overall project. We're still getting everything we wanted in there, just modified how we were going to achieve that. So that brings the total project cost down to $433,023.05. And right now, in our current budget, we have $445,000 available. So we are within the budget. It's my recommendation as city engineer that contract modification number 1 for the 2017 Starlight Beach Trust Fund improvement be approved.
Rich, has this gone to DNR yet, these changes?
Yes, they were sent to DNR, but we have not received
And
a
not,
response
you're
yet.
not expecting them?
I don't
any
anticipate
problem?
anything. They knew when the prices came in that we were probably going to be doing some alternates on it.
Well, thank you and your staff for all the work on this, Rich, and bringing that back in the budget. Much appreciated. I move we approve the contract modification number 1 for the Starlite Beach MDR Trust Fund improvements.
Second.
Nielsen?
Yes.
Noack?
Yes.
Walagora?
Aye.
Hess?
Yes.
And Johnson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
One other thing that I should have just to mention, I don't know if you saw, but steel was delivered, equipment's sitting over at North Riverfront Park today, so they will be starting on that here in the next week.
Great, thank you. Thanks for reaching our way. Next up, Alpena City Hall HVAC replacement.
Good evening.
Hi.
On February 27, 2018, the city received an open bids for the City Hall heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC project. Bids were posted on the City of Alpena website and mailed to 4 area contractors, with 1 bid received from a local contractor, Weinkauf Plumbing and Heating. The bid request included 3 alternate items, M1 through M3, which resulted in a total bid of $196,211. The scope of the project includes removal and replacement of the existing condensing units, air conditioners for the basement, 1st and 2nd floors, air handler in the attic area, and related piping. Additionally, installation includes a new heating unit in the air handler, related ductwork, piping, pumps, wiring, and new control system. Some of the existing equipment is over 30 years old. In fact, the air handler is over 40 years old. Has developed leaks, is no longer environmental friendly, and the control system is no longer compatible with new computer software, resulting in difficulty in efficiently operating the system. A section of City Hall roof will also need to be removed to allow the removal and installation of equipment. The base bid of $171,614 is the required item to complete the project. We budget $120,000 for the project. However, there's only $98,213 left in the building fund for City Hall. In meeting with staff, it was determined that this is a priority project. Some existing budgeted items could be delayed, which are included in the attached budget amendments. I also spoke with owner Mr. Robert Weinkauf, who reduced his bid to $169,114. It is my recommendation as Assistant City Building Official that we award Weinkauf Plumbing and Heating the contract for the City Hall HVAC replacement project for the contract modified price of $169,114. We also request that the attached budget amendment be approved to provide the required funding.
One question, Mike. Were you able to reach out to the other bidders that you originally sent the bid packet to and understand what the reasons for not bidding on this project were?
Yes, I did. I spoke with the one contractor that was here and actually installed our boilers. Kind of gave me a heads up ahead of time that they probably would not be bidding on the project. They said we probably have another project coming up. We went ahead and sent them a bid package anyhow. And just because of the scope of the project, workforce, and being busy, profit margins, they were just stepping away from wanting to bid on the project. I also reached out to another contractor that had done a project for the City of Alpena down at the public safety facility. And when they reviewed the scope of the project, they felt that it was out of their wheelhouse. It was a little bit more of a project than they cared to tackle at this point. And I hate to say, it's kind of the same thing, but everybody's busy, and finding, good workforce is difficult.
Mike, does this bid include the removal of the roof and fixing it, putting it back whole?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
And the control system, as I mentioned, I know I used this once before, Matt, but, it's, and you claimed that you didn't relate to Atari, but it's like the Atari versus Xbox, and it is very difficult to function. And the screen, I don't know if you've noticed, the vibration in the screen, You know, when there's a picture up there, it's the air handler. It's, you know, really.
I made a note of that
really
earlier.
well
It's
done.
like somebody's got to fix that. It drives me crazy.
So that's what's causing the jitters is the air handler.
No kidding. All right.
I have
There you
one
go.
other question about the roof. Weinkauf's not doing the roof. Are they bidding that out?
Yes, it's a subcontractor, Dave Zolneric, who did St. Anne's. The roof is familiar with the roofing system. Has all the tools and equipment. In fact, the contractor that put the roof on here, Lumsden, rented the equipment from Zolneric, Dave Zolneric. So we got an experienced and a person that's certified in the application of this particular type of roof.
Yeah, we met as staff when Mike informed me that we were well over the money we had. And it was as much my decision as anybody's that we cannot delay this anymore. We've delayed it for years. It costs us money, the system now, in terms of gas, electricity, whatever. And it is a first step. Obviously, down the road, the windows need to be replaced as well. They're not at all energy efficient. You can sit in my office during the winter and I can just, you know, watch my computer turn to ice as the wind blows through there. It's really cold. So it's a project that needs to be done. And so Mike did a really good job, as well as with the other staff, of looking at, okay, you know, we always end up, what can we delay, what can we move around, and that's what we did. And Mike worked well with the contractor to get some other costs reduced, and in the end, it worked out well.
And Rich,
It's a project we can move ahead with.
Rich was pretty giving with his parts of the budget, so I thank Rich for that.
Rich has gotten very good at that.
All right.
I learned from Bill.
Thank you, Mike, and the rest of staff. If anyone would,
I move we award Weinkauf Plumbing and Heating the contract for the City Hall HVAC replacement project for the contract modified price of $169,114.
Second.
Noah?
Yes.
Walagora?
Aye.
Hess?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
And Nielsen?
Yes.
Motion carried.
thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
We also need a motion, correct, too, for the, okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the attached budget amendment for the required funding.
Second.
The budget amendment?
Budget amendment.
Oh, yes, yeah, because that needs to be done as well. Thank you. I forgot about that.
Mike, that was you on the second?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Walagora?
Aye.
Hess?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Nielsen?
Yes.
And Nowak?
Yes.
Motion carried.
I move we adjourn to closed session to discuss water, sewer, litigation.
Second.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hess?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Nielsen?
Yes.
Nowak?
Yes.
Walagora?
Aye.